So we're going to go over how to write in a history class. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to read the following screen. This is what I like to start with. I want you to forget pretty much everything you learned how to write in English and focus on the history part. Okay, hopefully you had enough time to read. I'd like to emphasize the part about in history class, the emphasis is on using specific factual evidence. That's key. You have to know what you're talking about. You can't fake your way through it. This is why it's a test. Unlike a multiple choice test where the answers are in front of you, in an essay you are the person providing the facts for your teacher, and then you're arguing how it supports your thesis statement. And you never write in a personal manner, and we'll go over that too. First person is not allowed in a history essay, so you're stating the facts as they are in an as matter of factual way. On this slide, there's some general guidelines to writing, so I'm just going to put them up pretty quickly. I think they're pretty commonplace. I'll pause whenever there's one or speak to the points that I think are missed most often. Verb tense occasionally gets messed up, so make sure that you're always writing in the past tense. I've already mentioned history essays are written in third person, so do not say I feel, I think. Stay away from using second person as well. Make sure when you're using your paragraph organization, your indentations are clear, so it is clear to the reader when your next paragraph starts. This point is very important because students omit these a lot of the times, and they're very important to the structure of your writing. Topic sentences. Once again, we've been practicing main ideas, and this is the idea that you write a sentence that will umbrella everything that you will talk about in your body paragraph, and you will tie it back to your thesis categories. So these are very important. Make sure to take time that you do a good job with these. At the end of the paragraph, don't just end abruptly. Have some sort of conclusion sentence. A lot of times students use transitions to indicate that they're done with that paragraph and going on to the next one. But wrap it up. Make it neat before you move on. Okay, body paragraph should have topics, especially with a comparative essay. So we've been studying in terms of social, political, economic, and cultural. So you're not just randomly writing about anything. Your body paragraphs have a specific topic of focus. Facts have to be given in the essay. You cannot get around this. The more specific you are, the better, but don't be afraid. If you forget somebody's name, you can describe who they are. If you forget the name of a specific word that you like to use, but you can describe it, do that. It's better than omitted it. Whenever you have just a moment where you forget something, write to your best ability. But at the same time, don't make things up because you will get points counted off. And you have to be specific. You cannot just be vague in general and say that there were rulers and they fought many wars. That's going to be too vague to get you points. You have to be specific and use specific evidence that you've been charting and been studying. And then explaining those. We'll talk more about analysis later, but you have to say why your points are important and significant and why the facts are important to tie back to support your thesis. And then the rule of three in the body paragraphs we'll talk about more, but essentially if you want to get an A+, you have to support your thesis with at least 3 facts or details and 3 points of analysis to back those up. In a comparative essay, it would be 3 direct comparisons per body paragraph with analysis to back those up. Pre-write, I'm going to let you read this. It's a must. You will get points counted off if I do not see some sort of pre-write. The one that I have on the screen, the Venn chart, is the best one for comparative essays. It takes a few minutes, not very long. So in your case, if you have 2 categories to compare, say social and economic, you would make 2 little Venn charts, one for social, one for economic, and you'd fill it in. No more than 5 to 10 minutes, but this will keep you on track throughout the entire essay. Introduction paragraph, I call the thesis paragraph because you have to do certain things to be able to obtain this point for an AP exam. So I'm going to put the 4 things on the screen, and every time you write an introduction paragraph for me, these are the 4 things that I will expect to see. Set the scene. a vague, big general statement about what you're talking about and where we are. So I like to say, where is the, topic taking place? What is the approximate date? During the 1500s in Asia, there were major empires. That is probably good enough to set the scene. Doesn't have to go into too much detail. We're talking 1 to 2 sentences max. Fully addresses the prompt really means restate the question in your introduction. Maybe not the same exact words, but this is where you want to say 2 of those empires were, Qing and Tokugawa, and they have similarities and differences. Taking a position and categories for analysis is the meat of your thesis statement. A lot of times you've been taught that this is done in 1 sentence, but sometimes it can take up to 2 sentences to do this in an accurate and a manner that's going to get you the most points. So taking the position is where you actually make a statement that you're going to prove. You make an argument to prove. It doesn't have to be the strongest argument. So you would say, for instance, maybe you're going to say in a non-comparative essay that Tokugawa Ieyasu is the greatest ruler ever. That's definitely a position. But now you have to go and add categories for analysis to back up your position and lay out the plan for your essay. So instead you would say Tokugawa Ieyasu is the greatest leader in history. For example, he had a strong military, he got rid of the daimyo and diluted their power, and he opened up Osaka to more trade opportunities. Now you have 3 categories for analysis that I know you'll be talking about in your paragraphs. And for a comparative essay, it's a little bit different, but we're going to be talking about that later. But we call this the 4-note paragraph. So the 4 things: set the scene, fully address the prompt, takes a position, and providing categories for analysis are a big deal. Plan of attack. Okay, so in this particular slide, I've given a prompt, a simple prompt, and I have done all 4 of those things that I've mentioned in the previous slide. So take a minute to read it, see if you can address it. Basically set the scene real quick in the first sentence. It's only 3 sentences. That's all it takes. So I would really like you to focus on how it's the 3rd sentence that really is the thesis with the categories. Just by saying had a major impact on the lives of the natives is not enough to become a thesis statement. That is solely addressing the question. All right, if you have time and you want to practice, you can do this slide. It doesn't really matter if your facts are correct, but I'm just checking to see if you can make a solid introduction paragraph doing the 4 things that we just talked about. Basic essay outline. Sometimes we'll write a 4-paragraph essay, sometimes we'll write a 5-paragraph essay. To be honest, you will never have time in a 45-minute setting to write more than a 5-paragraph essay. For the essay that we'll be writing on Tuesday, everyone will be writing 4 paragraphs because I will only be giving you 2 topics from spec. So each of those will be 1 paragraph. So for instance, you might have a paragraph on social and you might have a paragraph on political. So therefore, 2 body paragraphs, an intro, and a conclusion. However, regardless of how many you have, this is the basic outline structure that you will follow. Notice that the conclusion, you may have learned in the past to restate your thesis statement. I say that that's really a good idea. Conclusion shouldn't be more than 3 to 5 sentences. Restating your thesis statement is never a bad idea because sometimes you're able to say it better in the end than you were in the beginning, and that could benefit you. But you want to do a little bit more. The so what means so what, who cares? Why are we learning about this? Why are these things important? And this is where you get the opportunity to explain why you think these things are important. Some people do historical similes, but make sure that you really know what you're talking about if you attempt that. I like global impact. How is it that these areas have impacted other parts of the world and maybe even how they continue to exist today? Analysis is really the hardest thing for kids to do in an essay, especially at your level. It's really easy for students to remember the facts, but for some reason it's hard to explain why those facts are significant and how they tie back to this thesis. So you always have to ask your question, have I answered the question why or so what? I love when you use the word because that indicates to me as your reader that you're going to explain something. So do not shy away from using the word because. Students will occasionally underline the word just so that they can see that they're doing, but think in terms of significance and importance. Because we're going to be doing a comparative essay, It's really important that you explain why things are similar and why things are different. So especially on that last bullet point, it says how they're connected and related. The point about explaining difference and similarity is going to be really important to your success on Tuesday. Every time you give me a similarity, say why it's similar. Every time you give me a different, say why it's different. Okay, so here's an excerpt from a student essay. So starting with a topic sentence. This is not a comparative essay, but I want you to read this and pay attention to, does it have a topic sentence? Are there pieces of evidence, and is there analysis in this essay? The first thing I want you to take note of is this is just one example of evidence. As you can see, it starts to go into a second result. So that's just one thing that they're talking about. Now, hopefully you figured out the difference between what's red and black. The red is clearly analysis that the student is making of the evidence. So think about that, because if you took out the red and you just read the black, it would sound really good. And this is why sometimes students think that they have analysis and they don't. So I encourage you, read it without the red so that you hear why it sounds like sometimes kids miss analysis, because it sounds really good without the red, but it is the red that gives you those extra points for analysis. Okay, the most important thing for the essay that we're writing on Tuesday is the fact that it is a comparative essay, and this is one of the essays that we have to be able to master for the AP exam. So let me give you a minute to read this slide, and then I'll go over some of the big points. Okay, compare, the word by itself means both similarities and differences. So sometimes the prompt will say compare and contrast, and that's nice because it automatically reminds you similarities and differences. But occasionally they'll just use the word compare, and you have to remember that that means you have to talk about similarities and differences. It doesn't have to be balanced, because in cases for your argument, sometimes there's going to be more similarities and differences, or vice versa. But you have to do both when writing a comparative essay. You won't get all your points if you don't. The thesis is the hardest point, in my opinion, to get in a comparative essay, because you have to remember to do so much. It has to be comparative, meaning you have to make a statement or take a position on similarities and differences. If you just say that things are similar and different, it's not a thesis. And I see this all the time. Students will say they were similar and different in their social and political aspects. That is not a thesis. That will be restating the question. You have to say something like they were similar in politics, but they differed in economics. You have to make some sort of position, saying where the similarities are and where the differences are. And that's going to be key to your success to writing a solid comparative thesis. Every single paragraph in a comparative essay has to compare. How do you know you're doing this? Because you should underline and highlight comparative words that you use to make sure you're getting those 3 direct comparatives. I've provided you with a list of comparative words that I have put on the website. I will allow you to have them out the first time that we write the essay. If you don't see these words in your essay, then you're not comparing. Do not leave it up to the reader to infer the comparisons. You have to directly state them. And once again, body paragraphs should have 3 direct comparison examples with comparative analysis. If you don't see it, then you're not doing it and you won't get your full points. Okay, once again, here is an example of a student writing a paragraph, a comparative paragraph about the Mongols. Starts with a topic sentence and then goes into an example with analysis. You've probably guessed that the blue text is the analysis, just like the red text was the analysis in the other slide. But I want you to be careful here. This is a difference. They take longer to write. This is why this essay will be long. The paragraphs will be long, because when you do a difference, it takes a while to analyze a difference, because you have to make sure you analyze both parts. So for instance, if the student would have said this occurred because China had a complex political and economic system with many well-fortified cities and a large army, period, that wouldn't have been enough to get the comparative analysis. They have to go on and analyze what Russia had that was different to get the full point. And lots of times students will only do a partial analysis of a difference and say something like China had blah, 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 and Russia did not. Well, you have to go into what Russia had that made it different if you want to get the full point. So take your time with differences, because they are a lot harder to do than when you're analyzing similarities. Okay, so here's some more slides on compare and contrast. Just some reminders of some of the things that I've already gone through. Determine the task has to do with the question. Spend at least 3 minutes with the question, asking yourself, what is the task word? In this case, it'll be compare and contrast. Sometimes it'll be analyze. Sometimes it'll be assess. Do you know what those words mean to be able to do that? I will put a list of task-directed words that come up in history on the website as well, but for our purposes on Tuesday, we'll definitely be doing a compare and contrast. Think about the parameters. Are there dates, places, peoples, anything mentioned in the question that will keep you on track so that you don't go off topic? And then, of course, key terms, words like economics, nationalism, gender roles. Those will tell you what your body paragraphs are about if they're present. For you guys, the key terms will be simple. They're going to be the spec categories. And so the spec categories will tell you what are my body paragraphs going to be about. Pre-write I talked about, just a little reminder there. I'll give you a minute to see. I've given a practice prompt that you can look at, and it says, how would you divide economics into categories? So think about how you could subcategorize economics. See if you could do that on the fly. Useful categories for comparison. You should recognize these. This is spec. However, if you want to make a higher level thesis and a higher level analysis to get more points in the expanded core, notice how you can subcategorize each of these categories to make them even more broken down for a better analysis. And you don't have to talk about everything in the category. So maybe you just want to talk about the agriculture and manufacturing and economics. You can make that part of your thesis. So maybe you're going to say they were similar in their agricultural economic aspects, however, they differed in their manufacturing. That's going to create a good analytical thesis, around economics. And then in the second sentence, you want to talk about politics, and you're going to say they were very similar in military and different in their nationalism. You decide what you want to do with this, but this will help you become better analytical writers by being able to subcategorize these basic topics for a more sophisticated thesis and essay. Okay, just a few remembers here. Notice in green, that is the lowest level of thesis that you can write. They were similar in blank and they were different in blank. Try to make it better than that. Like I said on the previous slide, don't just say they were similar in economics and different in politics. Try to say they were similar in economics in terms of their trade, however they differed in their agriculture, and then go on to a second sentence and divide up the political. The more you subcategorize, the more analytical it's going to be, but don't go so far that you're writing details. Save your details for your essay. Okay. In the next few slides, I provided a few examples for you to practice. I think it's important for you to try to practice. So it'll give you a practice prompt, and then on the following slide, it'll give you like an answer key so you can see if you were on the right track. So I'm just going to put these up. You can pause, rewind, go through as many as you want, do as many as you want, but I think that it's important to practice. Obviously, pause if I'm going too fast. I like this example of a thesis statement because it shows you how the student has taken the belief systems and, you know, justification of political authority and broken it down and subcategorized it to make a very nice thesis. Once again, love the analysis in the thesis. And notice the length. You know, these are not meant to be simple. If you want to go for the gold and get the highest score, you really need to think about, you know, how you can make this sophisticated and prove, you know, what you're going to say in your thesis. Okay, and last but not least, this is a picture of the scoring rubric from the AP guidelines, and this is exactly what you'll be graded on whenever you take the AP exam. You are going to get a similar version of this that I've typed up for you with everything on it. So don't worry about, you know, printing this out or having it. I just wanted you to have it in the slideshow. So I will give you a hard copy of this in class and also put one of these online because this is the grading scale that I will grade you on. This is the second page on it. Notice that it is based on a 9-point system, which I will convert to 100 points, but 9 is the highest that you can get on this essay. So pretty much if you're scoring an 8 or a 9 on this essay, you are definitely getting an A or A+. The basic is a 7. So if you look at this first page that I keep going back to, doing these 5 things on this side, on this page, are the most important things. You need to master this first before you even think about going to the second part. The second is just icing on the cake. If you mess up any of these, you have locked yourself out of the additional 2 points. So for instance, if you only partially substantiate your thesis and just get a 1 of the possible 2 points, the highest score you're going to be able to get then is a 6, and the other 2 points are not eligible. If you have questions about this, please ask me. I was told that y'all learned about this last year, but if you didn't, you know, you have the weekend. Come see me on Monday. Here are the bonus points. This is where you can earn that A or A+. And basically, if you read over this, you're doing more of what you have already been doing. So once again, I wouldn't worry about this part because if you're a great writer, more than likely you're going to be doing a lot of this and going the extra mile to get that 8 and the 9.